All right, it is Thursday, February 1st, 2024, and you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. I'm your host, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem. You can check out our fancy new website at MMAecosystem.com. Also run this channel, the MMA Ecosystem Instagram, lots of different things. So check those out. But for the meantime, welcome to the podcast. And on this show, we're going to get to the weekend in Asian MMA and then get to your questions. So if you have any of those, you can drop those in the chat. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like this video. Really appreciate all of that and your very passionate support. And have a new video out. It's the Road to UFC preview. If you haven't checked that out, hop over after this video's over, bookmark that. I go into the whole 3 fights that are going down at Road to UFC this weekend, break them apart, trying to give you as clear of a forecast as I can for how these fights could go. Honestly, I think all 3 of them are really close fights. I'll touch on those fights here in a second. But in the meantime, man, guys, it almost happened again. A couple of weeks ago, I told you that there is a chance that I could be going to Road to UFC this weekend in Las Vegas. Yesterday was a crazy day because it almost happened again, folks. If I would have had my way, I would be somewhere in the middle of northern Nevada right now, just trucking along in my car over to Las Vegas. Because I wake up yesterday and my friend with the UFC Shanghai PI is like, "Hey, bro, are like you coming to the fights?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't think so." Like I tried to, apply, follow up, all that stuff. Didn't look like it was going to happen. And he was like, "You're supposed to get approved. You're supposed to get UFC credentials for the weekend." And I was like, "Well, there must have been some miscommunication there." So he was like, "Okay, leave it to me." So throughout yesterday, I was getting ready to, I was looking at hotels, seeing if there are any flights that weren't exceptionally expensive, and they all were. Looking at same day flights is not the best thing. Now I'm like paranoid that my sound is off since it happened the other week. No, but we're good. So, man, I'm like scrambling. I'm like, I've literally packed. I'm starting to like think about packing meals for the car because it was going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars to fly down to Las Vegas. I'm trying to think through okay, interview questions. What kind of content do I want to do that I can realistically put together, that I'd be doing tomorrow, basically. Ideally, I would have a whole month to prepare, create YouTube thumbnails, write down some interview questions, brush up on a couple techniques, since this would be my first bigger event, especially representing myself. And so I'm like pretty much ready to go. And then around like 5 o'clock last night, or no, it was probably like 6:30 last night. My friend with the PI was like, "Hey mate, not going to happen this time." So I was like, "Yeah, totally fine. Totally understand. I get it." But just gave me a shock. In some ways, a little bit relieved. But if that was the case, I would have had to either cancel the podcast. I was thinking through can I actually hold the podcast and have the cell phone service to have it from my car, from my phone? Because I've got the mount, I've got the mic. It could all work out. But in some ways a little bit relieved. I will still be doing the live coverage for Tapology for the UFC card. I'll go ahead and do just the results for Tapology for Road to UFC. Going to have my own stuff on my page just for those 3 fights. But I am going to do, this will be my first time doing this, I am going to have a live fight watch party. Was thinking about doing just like a live reaction afterwards. And then thought, well, it's just 3 fights and I've never done that before. It seems like it's a perfect opportunity to do that. So I am going to do a live stream, obviously not of the fights, but of I guess filming me watching the fights. Kind of like if you watch, I mean, you all know what those are. I've done those for some one championship events with South China Morning Post before. So, yeah, looking forward to that. And hopefully, if you're watching, you can turn that on. Obviously, like, I don't think I can give you any commentary better than John Gooden and Laura Sanko, who appears they're going to be doing the commentary for this one. But who knows? Yeah, it could be fun. Maybe one person will come hang. If so, then y'all can catch the replay. We'll see how it goes. Just kind of a test thing for me. But either way, I was really encouraged just first of all by my friend within the UFC that was really advocating for me to get a spot with media. And if anything, it just opens the door for, for me to keep improving, basically, like to see like, yeah, what can I do to eventually get myself over the line to get those credentials. But I just went live with this website like 2 weeks ago. So it doesn't surprise me that the UFC wouldn't be handing out credentials to that kind of outlet. Even though I think I try to be professional, try to provide unique things in the media industry, but that was kind of my crazy day yesterday. I guess hopping into the finals, I'm not going to repeat the video that I just posted a few days ago. But I was on a podcast Tuesday evening with one of my new friends named Tyler, who runs an account called 138 MMA. And we also got really deep into these fights as well and had a great time talking about them, discussing different pronunciations for fighter names. It was a lot of fun. But I'll just say I don't know which fight I am the most excited for. I think in terms of entertainment, I feel like the flyweight fight between Jinyu Shirye and Ray Tsuruya has got to be just really fast paced. All of these fights, each fighter has like a strong case to win and a really clear way to try and win. For Tsuruya, it's grapple, outwork, out hustle Jinyu Shirye. For Jinyu Shirye, it's just defend the takedowns and pick this guy apart on the feet with your fast jab. For Ija, it's wrestle and grapple. For Lee Kai-Wen, it's strike, knock Ija out, use counter wrestling, knees, uppercuts, things like that to stop him in his tracks. Rongju in the lightweight final, for him, it's basically just do more damage. And for Shin Haraguchi, it's don't give Rongju any space at all, stick to him like glue, and put out just enough damage to really convince the judges. So each fighter, I feel like, has a really strong case to win the finals. There's no like mismatch, at least in my opinion. We'll see how it shakes out, but it doesn't seem like there's any clear mismatches either way, which I think is just a perfect scenario. I could see all of these fighters eventually in the UFC at some point. It seems like they've really impressed in each of their fights. The bantamweight final, whenever we get that, I don't know when we'll get that. Not really sure the extent of, I've heard it was both visa and health related things. So that dictates both the timetable and the place for Xiaolong to fight in this final. Feel bad for Lee Chong-ho. These are two guys that I would say, like, the jury is still out for me whether they will be in the UFC someday, not because they haven't been impressive in their fights, but just kind of want to see a little bit more from them against high-level opponents. Honestly, though, like, really excited for these three finals this Saturday. Yeah, wish I could be there to hang with fighters, take some photos, do some interviews, but all in good time. We still got, I always have to tell myself whenever one of these events comes up and I'm like, oh, am I gonna try to make it to Shanghai or Singapore or whatever, and then it doesn't happen. I'm like, UFC is going to have Road to UFC every year. They're going to be going to more and more Asian countries every year. There's going to be more opportunities. So, wish I could be there, but either way, looking forward to watching them this weekend. If you have any thoughts on Road to UFC, feel free to hit me up. Talking about UFC Vegas 85, the card that airs right before that. These at first, the Road to UFC, I heard that they're going to be at 9:30 local time. Now they're going to be at 8:30 local time. The main card for UFC starts at 4 p.m., which if you're allotting 30 minutes for each fight, do we have 5 or 6 fights on that main card? There may be 6 fights. And if that's the case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 fights per card. That would put the main card ending 7 or up to like 7:30 local time. So we may just have like a gap of up to an hour after the UFC event is over before Road to UFC begins. But either way, some solid fights on this card. I think these 2 fights between with the 2 Asian fighters got Jeong making his official UFC debut, fighting Blake Bilder, and then you've got Azat Maksum fighting Charles Johnson, both on the prelims. For Maksum, I think that this will be a really good test for him to see if he can make it into the ranked opponents of the ranked. Charles Johnson's one of those guys I think is really good, always really exciting. He always just gets really tough matchups, as he should. I mean, he was an LFA flyweight champion. That was a fight I was able to attend live. I believe that was LFA 100. But yeah, so I think that this fight probably favors Azat Maksum, but Charles Johnson's going to make him work for it. Jeong, this is the fight I'm maybe most excited about on the card. Everything I see from Jeong tells me that he could be like a breakout Korean star, but I almost want to reserve that statement just a little bit until we get to see him in the UFC. He looked good against Ija, but I was actually just chatting with his manager today, and he was saying, yeah, I mean, he performed pretty decent against Ija, but he had like torn ACL or something, and was still able to get back up from the takedowns of Ija. So now he's fully healthy, fully healed, doesn't have those ACL issues. So, Blake Bilder is a really strong, really big guy for featherweight, decent wrestler. But I think Jeong, this guy is an athletic freak. He hits really hard, and I think he's probably going to take this fight. But yeah, everything I see from him, I'm just like, he has a lot of intangibles and a lot of physical traits that I think could, if he creates momentum, keeps going, I think he could be a really big Korean star if he's able to keep it up. But before I give that full stamp of approval, I need to see his UFC debut. Need to see him at full health, see how he does. But really, really excited to see Jeong. Again, I was talking to his manager, and he was like, he was grappling with Cody Steele, which Cody Steele is a guy from Fury FC, another really good grappler, half Korean, and he was grappling really, really well with Cody Steele. So that's also a really good sign. So that's UFC Vegas 85. Obviously, just touching on the 2 Asian fights, lots of other good fights on there. But otherwise, this weekend, you've got 1 Friday fights. What is it, 50? Yeah, tomorrow from Bangkok. And on that card, you've got 2 fighters, Carlo Bumina Ong of Philippines fighting Xie Japong fighting. And then also you've got Leandro Gomez of Portugal fighting Avazbek Kolmazayev. The main fight there, Carlo Bumina Ong, he's a solid but young Filipino fighter fighting Xie Japong. When that fight was announced, I was like, who's Xie? I don't know this guy. Because usually, like, if a Chinese fighter gets signed to one championship, even 1 Friday fights, I've heard of him. I haven't heard of this guy. He's a 3-0 Chinese fighter, and I believe it's been a minute since he fought, which I think is why I hadn't heard of him. But it's been several years since Xie has fought. But that fight goes down. Catch it on one's YouTube channel. Grachan 67 going live from Osaka, Japan on February 3rd. WCCS 10 event from Philippines. And then got Black Combat has a event. A lot of guys kind of starting their, pro careers on that card. One Pride Fight Night 76. That is going down on February 3rd, this Saturday from Jakarta. There's two pretty big fights on that card. The first one is Steve Suwardi, probably the most popular Indonesian fighter outside of Jeka Sargi, is defending his flyweight title against Irfan Arwan. Now, this seems like a little bit of a mismatch to me. Arwan, I think, is 3-1. He's won his last 3 fights, whereas Steve Suwardi, a lot more fights to his name, something like 12-4, and is trying to defend his belt for the second time. And this he's a great grappler, really popular guy. At the same time, he has been pretty active. So it seems like he's kind of cleaned out the One Pride flyweight division. I don't know how this fight will go. He is also 39 years old. So at some point you have to start thinking that the wheels are going to fall off or at least start wobbling at some point. So anything could happen with that. The co-main is the one that I'm really excited about. Yuri Kayati, who is 6-1, and he is the One Pride featherweight champion. And honestly, if you had to ask me, and I mentioned this on the podcast I was on Tuesday night with 138 MMA, if you had to ask me who's an Indonesian prospect that we may not know about that could be on something like Road to UFC in season 3, Yuri Kayati would be the first guy that I would commend to you, outside of all the other Indonesians that have fought before. And honestly, if you look at season 1 of Road to UFC and then season 2, I would actually say season 2 had the stronger cast of Indonesian fighters, even though Jeka Sargi did end up going to the finals and getting a UFC contract. Overall, the guys on that first season, Jeka, Jeremiah Sirigar, Hans Anga Hans, and Gugun Guzman were the 4 Indonesian fighters. All of them except Jeka lost in that first round. Whereas the second season, you had 6 fighters, but I think overall they're a batch of much younger guys, a lot of undefeated at the time fighters, and I think have a lot more to offer going forward. We could see a couple of those guys back, but Yuri Kayati, really good striker, lots of finishes to his name. He's won, I think, his last 6 fights in a row. So he's someone I'm really going to be watching. If he wins, he's going to go up to 7-1, although he is fighting Firman Muharrem Sayok, who is 5-0 in his own right. So this is 6-1 against 5-0, one of the best fights that could be made in Indonesia right now. So that's definitely one to watch. Other than that, from One Pride, not much going on this weekend. Some other just Asian MMA news I want to touch on. You all saw that Beksat Almahan signed with the UFC, and really good Kazakh bantamweight. My number one Kazakh prospect outside the UFC. So he's an Octagon veteran. Just came off a finish at Octagon 52 last November. Apparently, we're going to know his debut date and opponent really soon. Probably going to be on one of these Apex shows. The Rise and Landmark 9 card was announced, which they switched things up. Originally, this date of March 23rd was going to be Rise 46. Now that has been changed to, I believe, April 29th. I think. But at this Rise and Landmark show, you've got Roberto Satoshi Souza versus Keito Nakamura, Igor Tanabe versus Kiichi Kunimoto, Ryogo Takahashi's on the card, Ryo Takagi, and then, of course, the previously announced Naoki Inoue versus Shoko Sato, Renu Kubota versus Shim Rui of Korea. So some solid fights there. I think perfect for like a landmark show that's going to go down in Kobe, Japan on March 23rd. Also announced Choi Sung-gook, who has fought his last 5 fights for Road to UFC, finally got his first fight outside of kind of post Road to UFC, which the timing is perfect if he wants to hop into third season, which personally, I would love to see him not hop in the tournament for a third time, be able to have some more full training camps, maybe get a fight with like UAE Warriors, even LFA, something like that. But he is fighting at Double GFC March 9th. Double GFC is coming back. So he's going to be, I'm guessing, in the main event fighting for the flyweight title against a Japanese fellow, Kotetsu Hara, I believe is his name. But glad to see Choi Sung-gook outside of Road to UFC fighting at home in Korea. Hopefully we can get a little bit more energetic performance out of him and pulling for that guy to finally kind of put some more pieces together. It seems like he's always looked decent on Road to UFC, but kind of point fighting, never really just like letting his hands and kicks and knees flow together in combinations to inflict a lot of damage, a lot of close decisions. So, but yeah, he's still in his 20s. He's still not that deep into his career. So hopefully we'll get to see the next evolution of that. Arisa Matsuda, top Japanese prospect. She is fighting on the Deep Show on March 17th against someone. I have no clue who this is. Madonna the Rocket is her nickname. No clue who that is or why this fight was made. Just announced like minutes ago, literally just tweeted it 5 minutes before the show. A Black Combat veteran, Cho Kyo Jun, 3-0 fighter. He is going to be fighting on One Friday Fights on February 9th, a week from tomorrow. Opponent TBA, but this guy, he's 18 years old, getting a little bit of hype behind him. He's got 3 first-round knockouts. Interested to see who they match him up with. Speaking of one, Victor Tsui is back in One Championship as their CEO of international development. Kind of their outside. I don't know what that means because all their shows are international in a way, outside Singapore or outside Thailand, maybe. Victor Tsui kind of co-founded One Championship, back then One FC. I'm guessing with Chatri Sitiodong, but not sure who all the team was when they first started, but he at least was a big part of One Championship. Really, I mean, it seemed like he did a lot of good things for the promotion. It rose up to what it was. And then he left in 2020, I believe, but has still been on the board. I think he's been doing something with a Canadian hockey team, I think. Not really sure on that, but not sure what that'll change for them, but I don't know. Could be something good for them. All right, let's get to your questions, shall we? Since we lost a little bit of time there. All right. Big news. The reports you poured on a while ago got confirmed. One Pride Indeed now have a partnership with both WLF and JCK being announced at their press conference. There you go. And to be fair, I was rehashing what I saw on socials on WeChat. But thank you. Yeah. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the BSD versus Dustin debacle? Why is Dustin posting tweets about this fight being called off when his fight wasn't even signed? It seems unprofessional all around. Well, there's a couple different theories about this, aren't there? One theory is that the UFC offered this fight. He wasn't happy with what he was being compensated for the fight. And so the UFC decides to put pressure on him and announces the fight before it's even verbally agreed to, which, like, a verbal agreement. What is a verbal agreement? Dustin Poirier could have said, like, hey, yeah, love this fight. Let's try and make it happen. But let's see if we can figure out something that works a little better for me. The UFC could have taken that as a verbal agreement, saying, hey, sounds like Dustin's in. We just got to, work out some of the finer details here. But for Dustin, like, people say, like, well, doesn't he have a contract? Doesn't he just have to do what his contract says? He can't negotiate for more. Well, that's definitely historically not true across the board all around. Fighters negotiate for more all the time because the situations change, right? Like, he's fighting 5 rounds instead of a 3-round fight. He's also fighting someone way down the rankings, number 11, Poirier is number 3. And this is a really, not just a random number 11 ranked guy, but like a guy that very well could be fighting for a title in a year's worth time, or even less, especially if he's able to have a big statement against Poirier. So this is a really, really dangerous fight for Dustin Poirier, who for a while has kind of just been fighting a lot of fighters in a similar position, kind of like Nate Diaz, Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor kind of fights. Benoit Saint Denis is a very different kind of fight for him. So I can see why he might want to negotiate a little bit more, especially, I mean, I don't know what's in his mind, how many fights he feels like he has left. But for him, some people are interpreting this as a back and forth. UFC puts pressure on him, announces the fight, puts everything on him like, okay, now it's up to you to not disappoint the fans. And then Dustin Poirier, at this point, we are about 5 weeks away from the fight, right? So he's thinking like, hey, I already went to Florida to do a training camp. I'm in this. I need to like figure out if I'm fighting in 5 weeks or not, because I'm doing a weight cut, investing money in this. And so he says, hey, I don't think this is happening. And then the UFC calls him up and says, hey, what's it going to take to get this signed? That's one way you can look at it. You can also look at it exactly like how he said, where it was a drop in communication, couldn't reach out to his manager. Maybe the amount was already, they were already going to give Dustin that, but just he hadn't heard that. Maybe there's some lapses in communication here, as he said. He made it sound like, I mean, Dustin Poirier, at least right now, he hasn't shown himself to be someone who's going to like vocally come against the UFC. He, at least outwardly, comes off as very much a company guy, very laid back, doesn't want to start a firestorm. So he apologized for it. He took the blame for it. Although you look at, was it Gilbert Burns tweeted like, hey, proud of my man, Dustin Poirier, for securing the bag on this fight. So kind of gives you a little bit like, it sounds like today's event might have finally pushed the UFC across the line. I don't know what the truth really is. There are going to be conflicting stories on this for sure. There are definitely going to be, you ask Dana White, he'll tell you one thing, Hunter Campbell, Dustin Poirier, Benoit Saint Denis. It sounds like, what I can tell from listening to Helwani today, he said that, you know, Saint Denis got the contract for the fight and signed it a while ago, which makes sense, right? This is the biggest fight of his career. It would be, he's not in the same place in his career as Dustin Poirier at all, even though he is a fastly rising contender in the lightweight division. But I don't know. But yeah, that it very interesting. It's a deep rabbit hole, isn't it? Someone on Twitter replied to something I said and said, why on earth would Dustin's manager, why would someone of Dustin's stature not be able to get a hold of their manager for 2 days? Why would Dustin not know about this but post on social media? I wonder that same thing too. Did he anticipate? I don't know if he anticipated this kind of firestorm, or maybe he did, and he's just one clever little guy. So I don't know. Very interesting, right? Do I watch JHK's MMA All-Star podcast? I do sometimes, yeah. He fell for the meme news that it was rumored that the UFC will make a 165 and move 170 to 175. Is he engagement baiting or really just not smart? Well, he's a smart guy. I can confirm that. I've worked with JHK before, and he is a very smart guy. For the meme news I was referring to, was tweeted by Marty's Hairline, whereby he jokingly said they're making 165 and 175 just for UFC 300. How does a journalist like JHK fall for that? I didn't listen to that part of the podcast. I think I saw that on the thumbnail. So I don't know. I don't think that that'll ever happen. I don't. As long as Dana White and the current regime are around, I don't think that they're ever going to shift those weight classes. Like many have said, they would love to see them change up a little bit. Like if you could start over from scratch again, that does make a little bit of sense, because it's like, why were those numbers created? 25, 35, 45, 55 are all even 10-pound differences. And then you have 15 pounds up to 170, 15 pounds up to 185, and then 20 pounds up to 205. Why were those numbers chosen over choosing 165 and 175? I don't know. It does make a little more sense to do that, but then again, that would add a whole nother weight class. And if the UFC wanted to do that, it would give them another belt to defend, but it would also strip down their middleweight and welterweight divisions a little bit. I think they could maybe afford it, but I don't know. I don't see them changing that up, especially just for UFC 300. That's like that's a permanent move just for one event. So I don't think that they would do that. I don't know if JHK actually believed that, or if he was just trying to start conversation. It's one thing just to talk about it, just like I did, just to talk about it. And would they actually do that? Could they actually do that? What would be the effects of all of that? It's fine to talk about it, but I'm not sure if he actually believed that. I don't know. Or if he heard it from somewhere else. I don't know what his sources are, so who knows. But JHK is a smart guy. Good to see you. Thanks, my man. What is more interesting to you to consume in MMA media? Smart analytical stuff by the likes of Jack Slack, Ghost, and Tom the Go class, or just hot takes and drama? Well, you tell me. What's your favorite? If that's a spectrum, which I don't really think it is a spectrum, but if we were to put those at different ends of a spectrum, I wouldn't say I'm all the way on the side of analytical stuff. I wouldn't say I'm all the way over there. And to be fair, the spectrum I think would be analytical or not analytical, or there's different spectrums that you can have. I think that you can have both. I think that it's, for some people, like there are so many reasons that people watch MMA. Some people only like to watch fights if they're really technical. Other people only like to watch fights if there's beef, if there's a backstory, manufactured or not, if there's some kind of heat to the fight. Other people just want entertainment of like an exciting fight, I guess, like a fast-paced, wild fight with lots of highs and lows in the fight. I like a little bit of everything, but definitely move towards the technical side, but also not. It has to be both technical and exciting for me, which is just my personal taste. And I think it's okay that people like different things in MMA, but I would say like 80% down the technical scale. But I think it really, really helps and piques my interest if there is a story and drama. Fake drama, hot takes, clickbait, that's a whole different story. There's not much value and merit in that, but it does help when there's a little bit of heat to the fight. Even this, think of some examples. So like Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis, technical and exciting. Volkanovski versus Topuria, technical and exciting. Not really a whole lot of drama or like heat or I don't know, anything on the other side of the spectrum in those fights, but those fights sound really fun to me. The Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev fight, highly technical, really enjoying from that regard, but wasn't like a wild fight. So because it wasn't one of my favorite fights because of that, I feel like when Dana reacted to that fight, he wanted a wild fight. And that fight was incredibly technical and deep in a lot of ways. And that's why I think it was lost on so many people why he didn't like the fight, because there was so much interesting technique displayed in the fight. So it's all just what you like. And I don't want to act like there's different, like the people that like the highest amount of technique or the highest level of MMA fans. I think that we can all enjoy it in different ways. Like I can enjoy any kind of sport while not understanding all the technique behind it. If the game is exciting, has a lot of energy and fun swings with it. So, and honestly, you know, my favorite events that I've been to as an MMA fan were Invicta events, which would maybe surprise some people if you're not a big fan of WMMA. Also, a lot of the fights that I watched were pretty like low level, like fighters making their debut, but there was a level of drama, not like catty, annoying, roll your eyes kind of drama, but just like high stakes, emotions, honestly exciting fights of just like, yeah, a lot of just like ups and downs within the fight. Those were so much fun. And I think that's what I'm looking for most in a fight if I'm going to really enjoy it. Now there is like definitely replay value for me. Like I recently rewatched all the fights from the Road UFC finalists from the first 2 rounds of the tournament. And that was really, really fun for me because while some of those fights were not always super exciting, it was really fun to like dive into the analytics and what's really going on here. Why can't Lee Kai Win just seem to get off on Koya Konda in the semifinal fight? That was really fun too. So, but I mean, you know me, I don't really get into a whole lot of the pre-fight press conferences, jarring back and forth, that kind of stuff. It's all about the fight night for me. Yeah, screen went black. Are you familiar with the term reductionism? Yeah. It's a broad term, which is kind of ironic about what that word means. But do you feel like fans and media are very reductionist when discussing a fighter's skill or strategy? Do we need more long-form analysis in the format of articles, or long video essays whereby analysts or even journalists nitpick at film to truly back up their claims and opinions? So it sounds like what you're getting at is, do fans and media often lack nuance and lack a detailed, holistic picture of what's going on? And yes, we do. I think that in some ways, if you're talking to your friend about who you think is going to win a fight on Saturday, or if I'm making a 5-minute video, a 10-minute, even like thinking about, okay, I made this Road to UFC preview video, I could have made that way longer. Ultimately, it's 14 minutes. 14 minutes for 3 fights is really short. I had to reduce some things. I think as long as you acknowledge that there is nuance and that things may not go how you think and that there's always a possibility of this or that, I think that allows you to still say, these are the main 3 storylines of a fight. What I try to do in my Road to UFC videos, in those previews, was say, here are the big things that I see with these fighters, but here are some factors that make things more interesting. Here's a little bit of nuance. There's always the opportunity of a knockout. There's always, because like, how are you going to predict a fighter winning by an up kick KO, or a spinning back fist, or an injury, or like, there is so much outside of your control as someone who's trying to predict an MMA fight, that the best that you can do is just say, sometimes the best that you can do is say, okay, here's the top 3 things. if you're trying to make content that is digestible for people and that you want for people to just be able to watch over their lunch break or during a short car drive, something like that. I think that's what I'm after, at least personally, as long as you acknowledge the bigger possibility of nuance and that other things could happen. I think it is okay to, like you said, be a little bit simple in how you communicate. But I think if you frame it as just like, this is the only way this is going to go, this fighter's totally going to knock out the other guy. If you only present one possible outcome, I think that's probably what you mean of being reductionistic. Way asking, may I ask if you've got any news for Road to UFC Season 3? I mean, aside from what you all saw from Shu Hirata saying that they were potentially going to have women's strawweight and flyweight, welterweight, including all the other ones. I've heard either mid-May or late May would be the first round of the tournament. Currently looking for fighters. Beyond that, I haven't heard anything on it. Yeah. I feel like this season may be a little bit more heavy on East Asian fighters rather than Southeast Asian and Indian fighters like we had. I think that if I'm just trying to make a guess here, I would think that they may choose like one or two fighters from those countries, but it wouldn't hurt them to give them an off year to get more experience, train. I mean, those 4 Indian fighters are going to be at which I need to follow up on that and see who all is going to, the Indian fighters going to the PI anytime now. So that's all I know for now. Do you find the way that Chaudhry has treated Takeru very disrespectful? I have. The year that he was signed to ONE, Chaudhry trash talked Takeru, didn't give him any fights, then purposely switched the opponent. Yeah. I know. Oh, and then you say, I say purposely switched the opponent because ONE knew that Rodtang was hurt. They told Superlek in advance, but did not tell Takeru, so Takeru would be at a huge disadvantage. Yeah, there was some weird stuff going on there for sure. And honestly, like, I don't know what his aim was. It sounded like he had an axe to grind at that press conference last weekend when he said, like, I mean, he literally said, like, Japanese fighters come to ONE championship and get crushed. I'm like, dude, did you not just watch? Well, there's the Japanese guy, Hiroki Akimoto, who's done very well in ONE. You literally had several Japanese fighters perform pretty well on your show. Ayaka Miura doing pretty well. Of course, that was against another Japanese fighter. But, dude, there's been so many Japanese fighters do well. Shinya Aoki, like, that was just so weird to me. Sometimes I wonder, like, does Chaudhry feel like he has an obligation to defend fighters from Thailand? I don't know. It feels like he has a lot of loyalty to Thailand and Thai fighters. I don't know if that's part of it, but that was just really strange to me. Why you would do that? And then he's like, he'll apologize and be like, "Oh, well, I meant no disrespect." Like, okay, yeah, no disrespect, but all the fighters from Japan are terrible. Like, that was very strange to me. I don't know what the strategy behind that is. I don't know why you would say that if you're trying to break into the Japanese market and get fans behind you, excited about your product. There are a lot of really good Japanese fighters right now. Like, Japanese MMA is as good as it's been in a very, at least a decade. So I don't know what his aim is in saying that. I'm talking about the MMA side of things, of course, but very odd why you would say that. I don't know. Do I know any Asian fighters announced for Road to UFC Season 3? I don't yet. You're close to both Dan Tom and Ghost. How sad is it that they stopped doing very informative analytical threads because of copyright? Also, how frustrating is it that the useless MMA thread guys that thread about random and useless things don't get punished for DMCA and get lots of engagement because they're blue checks? That was, I know. I don't understand all of that either, because I thought under fair use, all of that stuff was legal. So I think if you get flagged for that, you can appeal it for fair use, but some people just, I think most people just don't want to have to deal with all of that. I don't know what the DMCA stuff is when we have fair use at the same time, because fair use allows you to use something if it's for educational purposes, or if it's like if you're meaningfully, what is it, like meaningfully changing the intent of the content. So like remixes, kind of stuff like that, is under fair use. I'm not really sure what the whole story is behind that. And I also don't see how this benefits the UFC. It's not just the UFC. I've gotten dinged for DMCA stuff on Instagram from other, usually bigger promoters as well. But I don't see how this benefits them. And I'll cite an example of Star Wars for this. So Star Wars, obviously one of the biggest cultural icons ever, one of the most, intense sci-fi fan bases, far beyond cultural phenomenon. And George Lucas, creator of Star Wars, is sort of, I mean, people love him or hate him. One thing that George Lucas has done that has really won a lot of fan loyalty is that he has been really, really loose with kind of like creative expression of Star Wars by fanboys and whatnot, fan films and different types of fiction. It's all fiction, but fan fiction, creative remixes, all types of things. He basically has let people have at it to create, reinterpret, use Star Wars content in a lot of different ways. And I would argue that that is one of the things that has made Star Wars so popular and big, is that they have not sought to lock down creative expression of the Star Wars IP in a lot of ways. Probably in some ways, yeah, if you're, I don't know, looking to make a lot of money off it or something like that. But I don't see how, if I do a screen record of like a UFC event and post it to my Instagram, or just like a finish from the UFC and post it to my Instagram, how that hurts the UFC at all. The only explanation I can think of is well, if they're going to get, if 1,000 people post the finish from Michael Chandler and Tony Ferguson, where he front kicked him in the face, 1,000 people post that, gets reposted a bunch of times. UFC wants all of that engagement to go back to their account. So if they can monetize it, they can get more for it. Again, that's not so much a legal sense as much as why would they really try to do that? Especially in when I'm obviously not claiming that I own that highlight. I mean, that'd be silly for me to do that. Even if I write explicitly in the comment or the description, I do not own this content, I'm still going to get dinged for it. That kind of content that analysts use specifically helps build UFC fandom. It specifically helps people to enjoy the sport, learn and be educated about the sport, and most likely look forward to watching their favorite fighter. UFC can put out lots of great analytical work as well. In the past, they would do that from Dan Hardy, different folks that would do that on various YouTube shows, Fight Pass shows, and they do a great job. But obviously, and they would admit this, they can't cover everything. They can't overturn every single stone. And that's really what the good of the YouTube community is for, is to be able to turn over every single stone of analytics. And I just feel like that would overall, I mean, you may lose some views and engagement if 1,000 people are reposting the same highlight rather than everyone posting from your one account. But the thing is that the UFC often doesn't, when a fight is when a fight happens and there's a cool finish, have you noticed how usually they only post like the moment after the fight is called off? They don't even post the finish. And that's because they don't want to like especially on TikTok, you can get dinged for posting violent content. So that's why they do that. So like, why not let everyone else post that and get dinged for it? I don't know. It seems like it is a petty attempt at a monopoly when actually this would help grow your fan base. So I don't understand it. I don't like it any more than you do, but it happens. Did I see the Suarez HBO document? I haven't yet. I wouldn't mind watching it. I saw it and it was really disappointed about the hyperbole entitlement, flat out disrespect to the current champion. Well, I'll have to check it out then. Believe Weili's comeback story is way more interesting and better than Suarez because Weili had to go through a career-threatening injury at 23, had to deal with racism in 2021 by media and fans. And finally, because of the things Weili has added to her overall MMA game, Suarez can't stay healthy, and staying healthy is a part of the sport. I find it very strange that people sympathize with that. Well, it's not that it's a bad story to be told or it's a story that shouldn't be told. Honestly, I would, if, Weili has such an interesting story, why don't we tell that story as well? It doesn't mean that we can only tell one story. I don't know. Let's someone tell that story. I don't know if I'm the guy to do that, just since I don't like hang out with Weili, but let's tell that story. There's been some documentaries on Weili in Chinese media, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say I don't find Suarez comeback uninteresting or unimpressive. It is. But let's check out the documentary. Watch it for myself. Reigns pun of the week, the Jessica Rose Clark of Singing with a Lark and the Andrea Lee of singing the KGB anthem with glee. That was a whole lot of levels that I don't know if I am smart enough to understand all of that. Well done. For all Dana White's faults, I have never seen him hold an event in England and say, Brits are bad at fighting. I know. Whereas Chaudhary just trash talks Japan while at the same time trying to break into the Japanese market. It is exactly right. That is so confusing to me. That's a good point. I have never heard Dana outright criticize a certain country, certain kind of fighter. I mean, he's criticized fighters before, but not because they're some from a certain country. He does. Yeah. I think he understands the PR side of it a little bit better. I don't get it. Why would you do that? Especially when it seems to me like relations with Abema are a little bit tense right now, considering the whole, we haven't heard from you in 2 weeks thing. Is Rodtang injured? I don't know. It seems like that. And then all the stuff with like K1 saying, all the different promotions saying that one ghosted them. Oh, it's really interesting. Did I know that Jeong Weili did a live chat 2 days ago? She explained why she called out Grasso in the live chat, mainly because at the time UFC wasn't offering her any fights. Yeah, fair play. Why does the UFC shelf her like that? Well, contractually, they're supposed to offer her a certain amount of fights in a year. Probably just because they had a plan for Yan Xiaonan at UFC 300, and she just hadn't heard anything about it yet. UFC hadn't offered the fight just yet, so I'm guessing that's probably why. So here's my spiel about the new 165, 175. It was clearly fake, but a credible journalist like JHK made a 15-minute segment on his podcast where he genuinely talks about it. So I think he sounds, well, you're entitled to your opinion. For the analyst versus hot take question I had earlier, I was asking what you prefer personally between the two. Between those two, analysis, absolutely. Yeah. Is it better to be independent or write for a big publication when covering MMA? Well, independent, assuming you mean like I'm doing, where it's just myself. The advantage of writing for a bigger publication is you're going to have credentials for pretty much any kind of event. You're going to have the support. You're going to have the team. Probably going to get paid a lot better. there's a lot of advantages for writing for a big publication. You're also going to get to learn from different people. Different people are going to be able to grow and develop and challenge you in different ways, edit your work, bring out hopefully the best in you. So I think ultimately it is better to write for a big publication. Not everyone can do that, especially in the time frame they would like to. But being independent, what's funny about being independent? There have been situations where I've been one of the first people to write an article about different things in MMA just because I'm my own editor. And I'll literally just I can write an article on my phone, look over it a couple times, get all the tagging and SEO data in there, and just hit post. Whereas I've worked for other publications before, MMA Sucka, Sportskita, the Scrap, All Star. It's a little bit longer process now. MMA Junkie, they've got a process down to make it as quick of a turnaround as possible, where you write an article, it gets passed to an editor, maybe someone puts a photo in it. But it's really convenient when you're independent. You can turn things over as quickly as you can do it, essentially. So that's an advantage. But overall, I would say working for a big publication, it is more professional. I was actually, just before I was here, I was kind of mapping out for myself, hey, what's the ultimate, if this website was running at its best and healthiest capacity, what would that look like? And the plan is never for this website to be just me forever. I would love to have a couple other writers working for me someday, but I'm not there yet. Even if someone was out there, unless they were a really, really talented writer that knew a lot about a certain country and they said, I don't want to be paid, then I would say, okay, we can talk. But I eventually want to have a kind of a small company. The goal is not, independent, MMA Junkie is owned by USA Today, MMA Fighting owned by Vox. So, but then there's other publications that independent, not so much in terms that they have different parties that they do have to satisfy. If they have certain arrangements worked out with promoters. So, I think that's how I feel about that. So you said, I know you're talking about this with 138 MMA, but who are some guys that we could see on Road to UFC this year? I think Korea has a lot of prospects coming up that we could see. Yeah, great question. Let's talk about some prospects. I tried to give my friend on 138 MMA a couple, but let me give you a couple more. From China, I think a couple fighters that you could see on there. Xie Bin could could resurface on there. Huang Yele at bantamweight, maybe. He is just coming off a loss, but it is to a UFC veteran, Brazilian guy who was a really good BJJ black belt. Ba'argung Jela Isa or Balgun Jinasuli, a Chinese Kazakh that just fought and won at Alash Pride FC last weekend. You very well could see him. Maybe they'll give Bate Bowl another chance. Wangji Jeong, a featherweight who is the JCK featherweight champion. He is down training in Thailand right now. Really talented striker. Wouldn't surprise me if you saw him on there. Feng Tian Hao, a flyweight who's been fighting with WLF on a really good tear, some really impressive finishes. Would definitely not be surprised to see him. Wang Xiaosheng, the JCK bantamweight champion who trains at Black Tiger MMA. He is a monster. Darmisi Jawupasi, who fought last year, Road to UFC, got to the semifinals at bantamweight. Yin Shuai, a flyweight with JCK. He does have a fight booked, which I don't know what it is yet. Another really good fighter, Agu Lali. He could also make an appearance on Road to UFC. And I don't know any of this for sure. I'm just throwing this out there. Those are the Chinese guys that I would say you're most likely to see. Korean fighters, Kim Min Woo, if he can recover, maybe they will give him another shot, unless he is contractually obligated to fight at Black Combat. Again, Kim Tae-kyun is either, I would bank on him fighting either for Road to UFC or the UFC next. Personally, I think that he could be signed outright to the UFC just because he has already fought for Brave CF multiple times, coming off a win over a UFC veteran, given that was a really weird circumstance at UAE Warriors a few weeks ago. But I have heard from people around him that he should be in something UFC related next. He also has a split decision loss to Roman Bogatov in Brave, which a lot of people thought that he won that fight. So he is up there for sure. Lee Jung-hyun fought at Road to UFC last year, was a big prospect. He could come back. I could see other fighters, Park So-won, who's fought with Road FC, good prospect there. Jeong, another Road FC guy. A couple other fighters that are right on the bubble for me, maybe might need one more fight. Sorry about that. One more fight. Park Jae-hyun, who fought as an alternate against Shin Haraguchi at Road to UFC last year. I thought he had a pretty good showing against Shin Haraguchi, defended his wrestling pretty well. I think that might have warranted at least a shot. Hong Sung Chan, who fights at Eternal MMA on February 10th next weekend. If he wins that fight, I think he should be a shoe-in for Road to UFC. He, I think, is a lot better than what he showed. Japan, I would say, oh gosh, a lot of these guys are with Ryzen, a lot of the top guys. But definitely if either like Shin Haraguchi or Rei Tsuruya lose, you could see them in there. Some of these other a couple Japanese fighters, I think, would just be signed to the UFC rather than Road to UFC if they were to sign. Shuya Kamikubo, wouldn't surprise me if we saw him again. Keisuke Sasu might have yet another appearance. Could be interesting. Patrick Sho Asami was supposed to fight at one point. Wouldn't mind seeing him back there. Out of Indonesia, I think most likely Windri Patalima and Yudi Kayati are my personal picks for fighters that could make it again. Ronald Siahan could do it, but I'd say if I'm choosing two, I'm choosing those two. Out of India, I would say my top fighters to join Road to UFC, Sanjeet Budwar, MFN featherweight champion, Angad Bisht, MFN flyweight champion, Clinton DeCruz, an MFN flyweight, really good grappler, Shyam Anand. Would love to see him maybe get a chance, maybe after one more MFN fight, but he's a really big fan favorite. Also fights at featherweight. Other than that, those are the guys from the main countries. I wouldn't mind if we threw like Peter Daniso in the main tournament. That could be interesting. I don't think if they're going to do women's flyweight, I don't think Wang Zong should be. I feel pretty strongly that they should sign her outright to the UFC. I don't see what the point of dragging her through the tournament is. She's already 31, 32 years old. Just put her in the freaking UFC. She could beat a lot of fighters already. When we often talk about Weili's immense resources when it comes to preparation, so I've got a different question for you. Is it her opponent's fault that they are not actively looking for resources? Yeah, it is. Or perhaps they don't have the money to pay someone. I don't know what it is. But I do think it's going to be a lot more common for sure going forward. Nathan, adding some more. Yep, Dong Hoon Choi. I think, did he just get a fight announced? he's one guy that I was like, you're right on the line. He could make it. Park Sewon, yep. Yuju Sang, yep. He's right on the line for me. Song Young Jae, yep. Lee Jung Hyung, even though he's already been on it. Yeah, I think all those guys you said are good choices, either right on the line or should be in there. Is having a resource advantage just an excuse for journalists and pundits to excuse the performance of Weili's opponents? A lot of discourse posts. No, because you have to implement it, right? It doesn't matter if you have a whole library at your disposal. You still got to read the books. It doesn't matter if you read the books. You have to use the knowledge that you learned. So what's the difference between me learning all those things and Weili learning all those things? I can't win a UFC championship because I'm not the fighter that Weili is. So that's the difference right there. So while Weili is given multiple resources and coaches, sparring partners, and analysts. And parlay off Rio, I love Japanese kickboxing promotions like Rise and K1. You know this. I've sent you some very exciting kickboxing fights. You have. I don't understand why Chaudhry trashes J Kick. I don't know either. Maybe he's trying to. Is this a way of enticing Japanese kickboxers to want to try and come and prove themselves? I don't know. It doesn't. It is certainly like rubbing the fans the wrong way, for sure. Oh yeah. Nathan Yuji Yannick. Gosh, don't know how to. Efo Viga is an athletic freak from Japan. We could see absolutely. Maybe Suzuki Takeya. Yeah, that's the guy that just got that 4-second flying knee KO, right? He's super young, though. Tian Hao Feng for China. Agulali is super young, but he's interesting. Yeah, a lot of these Chinese guys are super young. So I don't know. You know, at one point when I actually worked as Huang Yile's manager for a time, and I asked him, like, hey, like, you interested in trying to get on, like, Road to UFC? And he was like, nah, like, I'll do that when I'm in my late 20s, is basically what he told me. I want to just get more experience, which I was like, all right, fair play, man. But so I don't know if for these younger guys, if they're super interested, that was just him. But if they're really interested in getting into the UFC just yet, totally fine. If not, if they want to just fight. But I think, like, yeah, exposing yourself to more international fighters, I think, is a good idea if you're going to do that, which isn't something that you see WLF, JCK, they're both doing that. Agulali just went to Indonesia and fought a Russian guy. So they're doing that. But yeah. So Wei says, you got any news regarding the MMA scene in India currently? It's 2024. I haven't heard any MMA announcement, especially big Indian MMA organizations like Matrix Fight Night. You know, they're a little bit of an oddball to me because they, as far as I know, their next show, MFN 14, is that what they're on? Last I heard was going to be in April. Like, you're already like a third of the way into the year. It's like, oh, guys, what's going on here? I don't know if it's I think Matrix Fight Night has some good financial backing to it from just like the owners, probably a couple investors. But I think what Matrix Fight Night is, they're trying to be, this is me reading between the lines on a couple things that have been stated publicly. But if I were to guess, I would say Matrix Fight Night is trying to be a sustainable promotion and not accrue a lot of debt. And they are still early in their development. They've got a lot of fans excited, but like, so they've got this deal with Disney Hotstar Plus. I think what they have been really wanting is more and more lucrative sponsorship deals. I think that's something they've been struggling with. Another thing you have to realize with Indian MMA, and this is similar to other countries too, is that there's practically no live gate, no ticket sales for Matrix Fight Night. So they don't really make anything off of live events except for what they get for broadcast and then what they get from sponsors. So I think that has been a barrier for them to just like have tons and tons and tons of shows. They've said that they want to have more, like we want to increase the amount of shows that we have. And that's great to say, but they just haven't been able to deliver on that. And I think that they are really trying to figure out how to create more income from their product. I don't know if I'm right on that, but it seems like when I read between the lines on a couple things, and I know that's not always the best thing to do, but I've heard them say, them being like Aisha and Krishna Shroff, like, yeah, we're really trying to put our focus on getting some more sponsors for the cage, for the canvas, and they give away all the shows they have are free passes, because I don't think if they did charge that they would make a whole lot of money on them. They would be able to like charge a whole lot per ticket. So yeah, it's just that's just an interesting thing for having a big event like that in India. There are still shows in India. There is if you haven't heard of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Bidong FC. They are an Indian promotion run by Babajit Chowdhury, who is a Indian MMA fighter. They recently had a show, and they're having shows like about every other month. They just had 5 or 6 shows, but they've had some like pretty good fight. I mean, they're nowhere near like an MFN level, but they've got some pretty good fighter. They feel like they're maybe the next highest, even though it's a big gap, but they've got some pretty good fighters on that show. They had Sonam Zumba, a pretty, or at least like one of the better female fighters. They had her on their most recent show. Mridul Saika, who's an undefeated Indian fighter. He just fought on their most recent show as well. Also an MFN guy. So, there's smaller shows going down. Warriors Dream Series. It takes place next weekend on the 10th and 11th. So there's a handful of pro fights on that show. So it's there, but I don't know what's going on with Matrix Fight Night, why they're waiting until April to hold a show. But I can't be the one to say they should. It's one thing just to say, just put on more shows, you know. If it was that easy, they'd do it. So I don't know what the story is there. Am I familiar with Meta's virtual reality stuff? Is that a good way to experience UFC fights? One tried it and I've experienced it. Would be very strange to walk around the ring. I haven't. You know, it seemed like that was like a really big thing like a couple of years ago. Like LFA announced that, but I haven't heard anything about that. Did that fizzle out? I don't know. I don't know what happened to that. It seemed like VR was like this big new thing with like, yeah, entertainment, movies, concerts, MMA sporting events, but I don't hear about many people doing it, to be honest. I've talked to the girl that runs Xiaopong. She says she doesn't do the translations anymore because of the MMA media did to her documentary in 2021, and media used cut clips of that 1-hour documentary, and the media used those clips to portray her as a sore loser and excuse maker to make everyone like Rose. Do you find that sad? That our only source of information regarding Whaley is no longer done because of the things that happened in 2021. Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're referring to on that. I think I do remember. I honestly don't really follow that story a whole lot. If you want to email me and send me kind of what you're talking about, I'd be happy to review that. Serious question now. Do you feel that Ariel Helwani asks questions that try to lead to drama? I don't watch MMA Hour anymore just because it seems like he's acting like a promoter and heel instead of a journalist looking at the fighter stories. It's your opinion. I think he does that a little bit. But I think that he sometimes he will ask questions like, yeah, is there any beef between you? Like, kind of like, okay, tell us what was said between you and this person. And I don't think, on the one hand, it's like I don't think there's any harm in asking, but um, he doesn't come off to me as like he is like adamant on just like stirring up the pot and creating drama. But there's a lot of stories that go on that are untold, and things that are relationships that are strained that we never know about. And so I think it's okay to ask about those things, but um, you may not be interested in it. I'm not always that interested in drama that goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, that's how you feel. I don't watch the MMA Hour a ton, and it's not because I have anything against it. I'll watch. I think more often I watch clips after the fact, or if there's an interview I'm really interested in, which isn't often, not because he doesn't get good guests, but just because things that just pique my personal interest. But I'll hop into that live. And honestly, like, you have to realize, like, calling him a journalist looking at fighter stories, I wouldn't call most of what he does journalistic work. Doing an interview with a fighter isn't necessarily journalistic work. That's more just like sports media. But yeah. So I just saw on UFC 300 Google search that the main event is Jeong versus Jan. It's not. How accurate is that, and how mad will everyone get when they find out that Jeong versus Jan will be the main? There's been a lot of negativity regarding that fight since it was announced. All you got to do is look at the comments and Drake Riggs' article on it. Oh, that's interesting. Let me Google that. Don't trust what Google says. Like, Google is not the source of truth here. So if you Google UFC 300 main event, people also ask, who is the main event for 300? One title fight and a ceremonial title fight are scheduled so far, with the main event still to come. There you go. Women's strawweight champion Zhang Weili will take on her fellow countrywoman Yan Xiaonan with the title on the line. That would be a misinterpretation then, if someone saw that main event as Yan versus Jeong, because that's not the main event. No way. And also Bilal versus Leon Edwards, not the main event. I was a little bit, I work for Tapology, and I love everything that Tapology does, except for sometimes they will mark a fight for a UFC card as a main event just because it's like the top fight announced or broken so far. And they did that with the Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad fight, but that, I don't know why they did that. That is clearly not the main event. And I don't even really like that they will add some fights as like unconfirmed rumors, just because it seems like, I mean, gosh, we just had this whole debacle with Poirier and Saint Denis, with Luque and Brady, where we had Dana White himself announce these as fights that were done when they weren't. So, like, I just don't feel like we should be posting fights even as an unconfirmed rumor, because people are going to look at that and they're going to think, wow, this is confirmed as the main event. But no, neither of those two fights are the main event. I would be surprised if Jeong versus Yan is the co-main, to be honest. I think if I were to guess, UFC 300 would be Conor versus Chandler, Bilal versus Leon. But now the more I think about that, I'm thinking that might be not likely. Here's the biggest UFC 300 that you could do. Conor versus Chandler, Izzy versus DDP, and then Jeong versus Yan. That's the big, like, if you had all those, that would be amazing and massive. I honestly feel like maybe Bilal versus Leon belongs on another card. And it's not to say that, and that's the right fight to make. I know I'm going off the rails a little bit, the question you asked, but here we are. That is obviously the right fight to be made, but it doesn't feel like it is UFC 300 co-main event level, just because fan reception to that title fight has not been incredibly enthusiastic. Again, not that it shouldn't happen, but just I think a lot of fans think that it's going to be a boring fight, and it might be. It very well could be. Again, that's the fight to make at welterweight. There's no other fight that should happen at welterweight, in my opinion. But I think that maybe belongs on another card. Maybe go to England in June or something, and put that fight as the main event. Or who knows? I don't know, Chicago or something. I think Bilal's from Chicago. Do something like that. But yeah, I would think Jeong versus Yan will probably be either co-main or third from the top. And there's been a lot of negative feedback that I've heard on that is honestly just because of WMMA dislike. Have you all noticed this year? I feel like so far there's been a lot of dislike for WMMA. And I think what has sparked a lot of that is the Raquel Pennington, Mayra Bueno Silva title fight, which was not well appreciated by fans in the lead up. And then after the fact was not really appreciated. The fight itself was not well appreciated, which on the one sense, I totally understand that. If you hated the fight, that's fine. I won't argue with you. It was not exceptional, but we've had so many worse title fights out there. And so I don't, it's like, I understand the hate, but I don't know that our hate is consistent across, like, this may have just been a dud of a title fight. And if the fight, if Mayra Bueno Silva versus Raquel Pennington was like a fight of the year candidate, would we have as much even the skill levels being the same? I don't know, say they were just like, I don't know, chugged a bunch of Red Bull something, and then they were just like lit up and just have this wild, crazy fight over 25 minutes. Even if the skill wasn't to a certain caliber that you would want, would we all be saying WMMA is terrible? I don't know. And to rephrase, we're not all saying that. I think there's a lot of people criticizing WMMA, and I think in some ways that criticism is warranted, in the sense of like, yeah, we have a lot of high profile fights in the sense of like title fights where the skill level doesn't seem to be exceptionally high. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful not to criticize all WMMA as bad, because there have been a lot of really exciting fights and there have been a lot of really technical fights. But like, doing away with WMMA altogether, separating it into different different promotions, I don't see it. And of all the women's fighters out there, like, Weili is one of the most, if not the most technical, just technically deep fighter. And so I've seen the criticism for UFC 300 has been, I think, mostly lobbied at Jeong versus Yan, but it has also just as much existed for Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez, which should be a really technical fight. I think that should be an exciting fight. And then Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. Like, there are people complaining that there are 3 women's fights on UFC 300. And I don't understand, like, personally, I don't understand that criticism, because we know Holly Holm is an exceptional kickboxer. If you're just going off technique alone, I mean, personally, I don't think Holly Holm is the most exciting fighter. And sometimes Kayla Harrison is not the most exciting fighter either. But you can't deny that they're both two exceptionally gifted athletes and tacticians. So I don't know. I wonder, and I know I'll be stepping on some toes by saying this, but I wonder if there's a little bit of gender, of some like, we don't want women in our sport sentiment in that. Like men feeling like they have a right to own mixed martial arts and they don't want women invading it. I wonder if there's a little bit of that in there, whether it's overt or a little more subversive and under the waterline. So I don't know, and I don't want to point any fingers calling people misogynists or sexist, but some of it, when it comes, I'm like, gosh, guys, do you not remember all these amazing women's fights that we've had, and a lot of these really technical ones? I mean, yeah, we did have. I'm not going to defend Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva at all, but it seems a little bit odd to me. But I don't think it's a just Jeong versus Jan criticism. It seems like there's also been a little bit of whining when I saw those other two fights announced, especially the Andrade Marina Rodriguez fight. But hey, you like what you like, right? I'll email you, but the Xiaopong fan page translated in entire. Yeah, I remember that documentary. I think I'm just trying to remember where exactly it was quoted and kind of chopped up by English media. The Weasel did a 20-minute video psychoanalyzing. Oh, well, I don't really. That's not really the. I wouldn't call it the highest. I mean, probably going to get Weasel fans coming against me for this, but like, I wouldn't call that super professional sports media, to be honest. You know, I pulled out my phone and just Googled UFC 300. I Googled UFC 300 main event, and it, at least like where it gives you the question, like puts it into a question form. It said that there wasn't one announced just yet. I don't know. Everyone just wants Shavkat to fight for the title. Where did I hear that there could be some steam around like a Shavkat versus Colby fight, which I think that's the fight to make. As long as we're not thinking Colby will be next in line for another title shot if he beats Shavkat. In my mind, Colby is like 4 fights away from fighting for a title again. But Shavkat, yeah. I think that he needs one more fight to get that to punch his ticket. I think Bilal versus Leon is the fight to make right now. UFC signing more Kazakh fighters with Beksa Al-Mahan being signed this week. I think we could see a fight night or even an event in that area of the world later this year, early 20. I know. Hopefully this year. I'd love that. I heard about another guy that could be in the works. Adilet Nurmatov could be pretty close as well, I heard. Give me your final thoughts on Indonesia MMA fight scene currently. I see more and more events in the organizational scene that has been announced left and right. Besides that, Other Nation also has... Yeah. Indonesia is changing really quickly. And it seems like everyone is starting to want a little bit of a piece of the pie. One Pride Fight Night is holding monthly shows, usually where they have 1 or 2 title fights. And those have been highly successful, really big fan base, connected with Mola, TV1. They're killing it there. But it's that alone is not enough to get fighters to the elite level. I think they have to. They did a little bit last year, and at one point they announced a deal to bring in some Indian fighters to One Pride Fight Night. But so far, the only fighter that they've done is Govind Singh, and he looked great. Won his fight there against Ramos Supandi. But then you have a couple other shows. you've got Soma Fight Series and Cheonggu Fight Night, which Cheonggu Fight Night just announced their next show, their 29th show for March 3rd, a Sunday. And those are much more internationally focused, as they have a lot of fighters from their gyms, which are pretty international gyms. So, and then you've got what's going on with Cage Warriors, where the Cage Warriors Academy is bringing over big groups of top Indonesian fighters to train in San Diego at Studio 504, Graham Boylan, Mark Fiore, kind of under their direction. And I think that is helping. It's almost kind of like a kind of a smaller version, a much smaller version of like a UFC PI, but it is a developmental strategy that's kind of tangentially associated with the UFC. You know, Cage Warriors, close connection with the UFC. Graham Boylan manages a lot of British fighters that often go to the UFC. And Cage Warriors airs on UFC Fight Pass. So they have a goal of developing Indonesian fighters to send them upward. I just think that program, and they just renovated, kind of reopened the gym. I think that program just needs a lot longer. It needs more investment. Having, with the PI in Shanghai, they're able to basically control all levels of a fighter's training, not just the coaching, but also the diet, also the strength and conditioning. And it's all under one roof. They're able to do that. So I think Indonesia and India just needs that kind of development. I mean, you look at like China 5 years ago, think about where Chinese MMA is at. Because of the UFC PI in Shanghai, like this year at Road to UFC, how many of the four finals, they've got, and all these fighters at some point have trained at the UFC PI in Shanghai. Li Kai-wen, Jin Yushie, Ija, and Rongju, all at some point or currently PI athletes. So that program is really, it is working. It's coming together, and they were really successful in this year's tournament. Indonesia, I think, to get to that next level, they need it's going to take time. The PI opened in 2019, and the Cage Warriors Academy just started last year. So I just needs more time. I mean, Indonesia is just pretty far behind, but they've got the fan base. They've got a great arena to be able to hold a show if they want to, even if they don't have any Indonesian fighter or very few Indonesian fighters on the show. The fan base, the broadcast partner, the venue is all there to grow the sport, but they just need, I think, the coach, the training and the investment is what they need. Do you think the hate of women also stems from the stuff Strickland says? Whoops, said the quiet part out loud. Because that gets a ton of engagement and an excuse for his fans to be nasty. Yeah, and it's not just him either. I mean, was it Sean O'Malley that said that he wished that there were two different promotions for men and women? I think that there's probably a lot of fighters that feel that same way. I definitely think that what Strickland says does have an effect on that. It creates a dislike for it. And again, I'm not telling you you have to think every fighter is highly technical or exciting, but you have to give credit where it's due. And I will vouch for women in the UFC all day long. I've loved it. I was pumped when they brought in women, especially the strawweight division. I was pumped. That's still one of my favorite seasons of Ultimate Fighter, was the strawweight season. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still just as pumped. So again, not saying every single female fighter is UFC level that is in the UFC, exciting, highly technical. I'm not saying that, but there are a lot that are. And there are a lot that are really exciting. And I think they bring something special to the sport that men don't have. A lot of them are mothers. That is really cool to see that. A lot of them have, you look at these photos where that sometimes women will post where this lineup where it's them and then like 20 guys at their gym, just really, I feel like it adds a whole lot. Speaking personally here, just a lot of intrigue to the sport. You don't have to agree, but that's how I feel. Yeah, just kind of asking more questions about Indonesia. Example, Brave CF. Yep, they've been doing stuff in Indonesia. A big organization in the Arab world is investing their events in Indonesia, especially with the new announcement of IMMAF event going to take place a lot in Indonesia. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, that's the other thing. Brave has gone there too. The thing is like Indonesia is it like the fourth most populated country in the whole world? And MMA has typically done pretty well in Muslim majority countries. They do well. Part of this is the money available for investment, but the Middle East, they do pretty well. There's, I mean, I don't have to tell this to you guys. You guys know that the culture aligns really well in a lot of ways to Muslim majority countries. So I think Indonesia just fits the bill in a lot of ways. But yeah, Brave CF, they've gone there. I think that has really helped to raise the profile of Indonesia as well. How do I spell the fighter that I just mentioned? Trying to look him up on Tapology. Sorry, man. I don't know who you mentioned. Who you're talking about. Of course, you can't spell it. Is it Yudi Kayati? Yudi Kayati is Yudi. Last name is Chahyadi, I believe. Indonesian guy. See, you said that just 3 minutes ago. I think what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Anyways, tag you on. Okay, so you gave a screenshot. Let me see. Maybe if I just search UFC 300, not main event. Okay, I see. Just UFC 300. Yeah, that's wrong. And I think, and it says Gaethje versus Max Holloway is co-main. I don't know if these things are put together by a person or if they are put together algorithmically or with AI, but obviously that's false. We know that's false. You said the Kazakh fighter that was close to being signed. Yeah, Adilet Nurmatov, Adilet, first name, last name is Nurmatov. See what his record is. Doing this on my phone here. So he's actually Kyrgyz. 13-2 Kyrgyz featherweight. Fought for EFC, Brave, even fought for One Friday Fights. Yeah, pretty solid dude. Is it sad that the UFC only pretends to care about the Asian market? Yeah, it seems like a lot of the heavy lifting is really done by like Migu and Mola Sport. It seems like they do a lot of the heavy lifting to promote, but like why on earth did we not hear anything from the UFC about the Road to UFC finals until this last Tuesday? Y'all were asking me like every day for the last month, is Road to UFC finals still happening? Like, yeah, it is. I don't know why it's not anywhere on the internet. That was weird. I don't know, man. I think not being able to have live events, and when I say not being able to, they have tried. They tried to have an event in Seoul and in Shanghai last year. Neither of those happened. Ended up having an event in Singapore. It's just they have, for whatever reason, they have not. I don't know. I feel like the Shanghai thing. I don't know the full story there, so I'm not going to point fingers why that event permit thing was such a surprise or something left to be undone. But something slipped through the cracks there. The Seoul thing, they were just so set on Korean Zombie main eventing that card that there was no backup plan. So yeah, that was unfortunate as well. I just hope that I think once they get their rhythm back with Asian MMA, then it'll feel a lot bigger. But it is so weird to me. Like, Road to UFC seems like one of the most exciting. I know I got more skin in the game than most fans, but like, it is just so exciting to me. The tournament style, a lot of the fighters, super fun. It seems like something, maybe it's just the broadcast time. I don't know. For the first 2 rounds of the tournament, I don't know what it is, but it seemed like they gave it a little bit more love this past year for season 2, with the glaring exception of the finals. But yeah, let's see what happens in 2024 with live events. Okay, so you're from Malaysia. Interesting. That's cool. Yeah, welcome. Glad you're here. And I see later you saying, I want to know why there's no talent come from Malaysia and Singapore in the current landscape of MMA. There's a little bit of there's a little bit in Singapore. Singapore has some decent gyms. Of course, they got Evolve MMA. They've got, which is a lot of international talent, really. They've got like Pineapple MMA, where John Yodpech is a coach. They've got Matrix MMA, which is where like Sim Kai Jeong, who is in Road to UFC this last year, Shi Yin Tan, is that her name? Just recently signed with Ruby Sports, a Singaporean female fighter. I think Singapore has the resources, I think, and they've got like, they don't really have a lot of local shows. They used to have, I know there's a Vietnam show called Lion Championship now, but there was another promotion called Lion, I think it was called Lion Championship in Singapore. And I don't know where they went. I don't know if there's just not enough fighters out of Singapore to host a show. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, it doesn't seem like I don't think there's been an event in Singapore for a long time. Malaysia, they've got a show called Ultimate Beatdown, which they've got a show coming up March 9th, Ultimate Beatdown 51. It's kind of a hybrid show, different martial arts, but Malaysia, I'm not really sure. I mean, every fighter from Malaysia that has been like any good has gone to one championship, but it's been a while, like a long time since there's been a good Malaysian fighter. Like when was the last time one brought in a new Malaysian fighter? I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Malaysia. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I could name one gym in Malaysia. Maybe there's just not really, and you would be the one to tell me this more than anybody, but I'm not sure what the fan base is like. And again, Malaysia is a very, very populated country with a pretty significant Muslim population. So some ingredients there for a potential fan base, but I don't know I don't know. Maybe you have more ideas about that. But it'd be really cool. I'd love to see things kind of pop up there. Would love to see, at the very least, for one championship to go back to Malaysia, to KL, Kuala Lumpur, maybe this year, if they're going to try to go back to some of their old stomping grounds. I think that would be stage one. Is just like give Malaysians something to talk about. They only announced Road to UFC this last Tuesday. Yep. Since ONE FC heavily promoted in Singapore a few years ago and Malaysia, now the talent from there is getting less and less well known. Yeah, it could just be a lull. It could just be a lull. That happens with markets. I mean, look at Canada. Canada was really hot 10 years ago. They had GSP and Rory McDonald. Now, ever since GSP retired and Rory McDonald kind of, I don't know, phased out, went to Bellator, phased out, hasn't really been a whole lot of, there's been a lot of fighters, but no one really like topmost elite level in Canada. So honestly, like markets are going to phase in and out. So maybe, I don't know. And Singapore also is not a huge, I mean, it's a, you know, it's just that one city. It's that one area. So I don't know if it's just that, the sample size, I don't know. So Damn Tom says this a lot, but UFC doesn't do Asian Heritage Month. And when they have a Chinese fight, they don't do it in China. Yeah, interesting. I don't know. Great questions. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up for today. We went, wow, this might've been the longest show. Of course, we had the interruption, the intermission, forced intermission, but appreciated all those questions. Really loved hitting all those topics. And again, reminding you, live fight companion for Road to UFC this Saturday. Hope to see you there and enjoy the fights.